Welcome back to Winners and Losers, the show that usually looks at the weekend just gone, but no longer will. During the summer, we're going to be looking at transfer winners and losers, 2 from each category each week. Hamill, which one do you want to start with?
Creative, eh? Recycling the same format, but stick with us because there's some juicy stuff bubbling under the surface of this transfer window, isn't there? Starting with Mauricio Pochettino, feels like an odd place to start as a winner, given that he's just lost the Champions League, and Spurs will probably struggle to get to a final like that again under him anyway. But apparently Daniel Levy, the chairman of Tottenham Hotspur, has sanctioned over £100 million worth of moves according to the Mirror. And that will be music to Pochettino's ears, won't it? Having spent the square root of cool last summer. And we're sort of coming towards the end of a generation's worth of talent at Tottenham, aren't we? It's time to look to pastures new, to replace some key figures. And that's kind of what we're breaking down here. So Fernando Llorente, let's start with some low-hanging fruit. It looks like he's going to be released from his contract. Daniel Levy does not want to renew for another 1 or 2 seasons, as was previously floated. The big striker has struggled for game time in domestic competition. He's contributed okay in Europe, hasn't he? Some pivotal moments that he's been involved with, but I think that's probably as good as his Spurs career gets. He's now 34, he scored just 1 league goal in 20 appearances, 14 of which have come from the bench. Kieran Trippier, a little bit more surprising. Pochettino turns him into an elite fullback in a back 5, but he's been defensively suspect this season. He's played more than Serge Aurier, but that's not saying much because I think Serge Aurier might be on his way out as well. Poch doesn't seem to have tamed him, let's say, and his ways. But Kieran Trippier won't be short of suitors. Apparently Juventus and Napoli are both interested to the tune of £30 million, which feels odd to me. Odd destinations, given that Juventus have João Cancelo. Of course, Cancelo has been linked with a host of other top clubs, given the season he's had. But that feels like a downgrade to me, going to Kieran Trippier. So maybe Napoli is the more obvious destination. And that would be a decent sum, wouldn't it, for Kieran Trippier, given that he seems not surplus to requirements at Spurs, but they kind of want someone a little bit more defensively sound, don't they? Christian Eriksen also looks to be on his way out, particularly given that performance in the final. Kind of looked like he was thinking of the Bernabeu already. Real Madrid obviously touted as a destination for him. I kind of think he might sign a new contract. That might be crucial in terms of keeping Pochettino happy, keeping him at the club. But if they want to cash in, now is the time. Of course, 1 year left on his contract. Someone can sign him on a pre-contract in 6 months. And you're probably, still looking at £70 million if you're parting ways with him this summer. Still Spurs' best creator by a long shot, 2 key passes per 19, 20 Premier League goal involvements this term. But can Spurs afford to miss out on that windfall? Probably not. Like we said, they've got to turn over some talent, haven't they? Toby Alderweireld is another one. 1 year left on his contract, and a very similar situation to Christian Eriksen. But he has a £25 million release clause that is active for the month of June and July. And Manchester United are sniffing around, maybe not as enthusiastically as they were last summer, probably owing to those injury woes that are totting up now, aren't they? But still well worth a punt at that money. And again, maybe a good time to part ways with Spurs. So he's guided them to a Champions League final. He's helped them. He's not done it single-handedly by any means. Davinson Sanchez and Foyth are promising young centre-halves, aren't they? Might be a good time for them to step into the fray. Key areas. You're going to take care of this, aren't you, Joseph?
Yeah, so obviously a lot of negatives there with players leaving, but there have been some big positives. £100 million to spend. If they got rid of Eriksen as well, you might see an increase on that. And they've been linked with some really good players over the last week in particular. The areas they're reportedly looking to sign in: central midfield, full-back, centre-back, and a replacement striker. Obviously, Llorente going out the door. I'd be slightly worried about Atletico Madrid coming in for Alderweireld as well. Obviously, losing some high-calibre centre-backs this summer already, haven't they? Los Rojiblancos. But the central midfielder that Poch is reportedly targeting, Giovanni Lo Celso.
We like it. We like it.
We love him. We've talked about him to death on this show, on the podcast, on Eurofootball Daily, haven't we? And it's easy to see why. A real jack of all trades, can occupy multiple midfield positions. They've reportedly had a €55 million bid turned down already by Betis. Betis are hoping that somebody's going to pay that big old release clause of £88 million. Of course, they only made that move permanent this summer. So if they do want to sell, they're just going to wait out for that release clause, because somebody is going to end up paying it, whether it's Tottenham, whether it's Man United, Man City, Liverpool. Somebody's going to come in from the Premier League and pay that money. And it's easy to see why. 13 goal contributions in just 2,200 minutes in La Liga, 4.2 tackles and interceptions, 2 dribbles, and nearly 3 shots per game. You love him, Hamill.
Yeah, I do. And I was pretty excited to see how he was developing, at Betis this season under Setien, because he was a much more attacking presence as opposed to kind of a deep-lying playmaker. And he kind of tended to be a little bit more reserved at PSG, but like you said, that's kind of showed his tactical versatility. And we've been waxing lyrical about him for ages, and PSG are probably thinking we let him go for a snippet right now.
Absolutely.
Not that they give, a shit about money.
Yeah, absolutely. But if Tottenham do want him, they are going to have to increase that bid by about £33 million. Let's see if they manage to do it. The other name linked in that central midfield area continues to be Tanguy Ndombele. Spurs are reportedly in talks with Lyon. Now, they've entered at around £55 million, so you can kind of see that sort of theme developing. They've got about 50 plus million to spend on a central midfielder. They've targeted Lo Celso, maybe had some pushback there. Then they've moved on to Tanguy Ndombele. And again, very easy to see why. But Lyon are also holding out for over £80 million for their star midfield. 9 goal contributions in 2,300 minutes. Also bringing in 4.2 tackles and interceptions, 2 dribbles and 1.9 key passes. I think if they do let a Victor Wanyama go this summer, then they can probably put that fee on top of the 50 and bring in a central midfielder. I'm not sure Spurs have 80 to 90 million to spend on one player. I think it's probably a step too far if they want to sign a replacement for a fullback. They want to sign a replacement forward.
Yeah, at least if they are going to spend that sort of money, and if that is the majority of their summer spend, then they are going after players who, like you said, profile well in all areas of the pitch. Like they're going after multifaceted players, which is exactly what they should be doing. I really like these 2 transfer targets. Like we said, even Spurs getting to the Champions League final, we don't necessarily think that means they're going to go after the top brass, the James Rodriguez's, the Iscos of this world. But they're going for that band under that Poch can probably develop, probably can get more out of. And I really like these potential signings, hence why they're in our winners.
Yeah, exactly. The other name mentioned is a forward, Maxi Gomez, of course, the 22-year-old striker at Celta Vigo. With Llorente going out the door, it looks like they're going to want to bring in cover. But again, Celta want his release clause paid if anybody wants to sign him. And that is £43 million, which is not cheap and would represent somewhat of a risk, I think, if you're Tottenham Hotspur. If you can get him for a lot less, like your 20s to 30s, they'll be thinking, might take a punt, but at 43 million, that's a sizable chunk of that £100 million budget.
I mean, 18 goal contributions for a team fighting relegation is pretty sound. So you imagine his numbers would, significantly increase in a side like Spurs. So there's definite room for progression there. But you do worry, kind of the Argo Aspas was still their shining light, wasn't he?
Yeah.
So
I'd be a little bit worried, especially as Liverpool are also quite interested in the player, that you suddenly get into a bit of a negotiation battle when it ends up with you paying that release clause. Suddenly you've paid £120 million worth of release clause on 2 players and your budget's completely gone. Specifically as they're also looking at Ryan Sessegnon, still heavily linked with him. Obviously went down with Fulham last summer. They're actually linked with his brother as well, Steven Sessegnon. I think they're trying to get a double swoop done for both of the brothers, which would be pretty interesting.
Not since the Nevilles have we seen brothers line up in the Premier League, surely.
Which would be pretty funny. But
Rafa.
The Torres.
The Torres as well.
But I'm kind of thinking that if they want to get Sessegnon, Fulham are going to have to lower that price tag, because Fulham are still looking for that sort of 40 to 50 million pounds. I don't think Spurs are going to risk spending that on what is still an unproven Premier League talent, still like an unproven top tier talent. I think he's done it in the Championship, hasn't he? But he's yet to do it in an established major league.
I mean, Danny Rose has come back into the fold from being on the peripheries. Obviously talked about his kind of mental health, didn't he? Poch has brought him back into the camp. He's displaced Ben Davies. They're very strong down that left-hand side if they retain those 2 players. So 40 million probably represents too much for Spurs in this window. Raphael and Fabio was who I was thinking of.
Yes.
When you were talking that whole time, glazed over because I couldn't think of Raphael's brother, Fabio.
Never mind, mate. Either way,
So-
we have put Spurs in our winners because we think some of these names they're linked with, Lo Celso, Ndombele, Maxi Gomez, all exceedingly good signings, especially if they let the likes of Fernando Llorente go and find a replacement for Christian Eriksen. It could be a good window for Tottenham Hotspur, but hold your horses just in case they end up spending 0, which is totally possible. Moving on to our first loser this week is Adrien Rabiot, of course, is becoming a free agent this summer, having not played for PSG in 2019. I think he made his last appearance for the club around December 2018. The reason that he has been put into our losers category is he seems to have botched every major transfer and is now left scrambling for a club.
Bit of a fall from grace.
Well, especially when you're linked with Barcelona, they've rejected him.
Yeah.
Real Madrid, they've rejected him.
I mean, Grace-
Bayern Munich, they've rejected him.
Grace might be the wrong word, given that he's just been rotting in the reserves. But yeah, his escape route is getting significantly less decadent.
Yeah,
isn't
I mean,
it?
you're going to talk about
Deluxe.
his stats because he is an exceptional player on the field.
Without a doubt.
Very, very few players of his age that are better in that area of the pitch. But off the field, he is quite clearly a nightmare. Let's not forget he, of course, refused to be called up to the standby list for the France team at the World Cup. He also has been filmed partying on multiple occasions after matches that PSG have lost. Let's not forget that he refused to play in one PSG pre-season friendly because it was too cold. Let's also not forget that he didn't want to play and he actually sat Tuchel down and said, I don't want to play in the number 6 role anymore. I don't want to play there anymore.
It's not a great rap sheet, is it?
And of course, his mother is a notoriously difficult woman to deal with. Whether or not she's still involved with the player, multiple reports are saying yes, multiple reports are saying no. What is clear is that Barca, Real and Bayern have all withdrawn from the process. They don't want to be involved with him. As good as he is on the field, off the field, it's just too much hassle and he's asking for too much money, which of course means Manchester United are now involved. Not really surprised at this one. Apparently we've offered him £170,000 a week and a £4 million signing on bonus. Everton are also interested in him. I'm also hearing that Juventus might be interested in him, but I feel like Juventus have already signed quite a few midfielders.
Yeah.
And Ramsey's coming in as well. I just can't see this move happening to Juventus. I think it's likely it's going to be a Premier League club that can offer that much money. On the field, I would love Rabiot to fill into that Manchester United side. He would be a definite upgrade on a Fred or a McTominay who are there at the moment. Obviously, Herrera leaving the club. But off the field, I have extreme concerns. We've got enough players that are nightmares off the pitch. Do we want to add another one to the ranks? We probably have to because we have such a dearth of talent.
Yeah, I'd say for Manchester United in particular, it's worth the risk at the
So would
moment.
I.
And you always take the media reports, particularly around someone who isn't well liked in the national setup, with a pinch of salt, don't you? Part of me thinks he can't possibly be as bad as the picture that's being painted of him.
Yeah.
Which, you know, you should always apply a healthy dose of cynicism, to media reports, shouldn't you? Hence why we launched Behind the Headlines. So if you've not checked out Behind the Headlines, please go and do so after this.
I think if a
but go on.
player of his level is available, you have to sign him at Manchester United,
Yeah.
given the dearth of talent you have. What you've also got to do is manage the situation really well off the field. The contract has to feature a number of clauses, whether it's a refusal to play, your wage drops, or going on all this
that
sort of
seems
stuff.
fair.
Because we don't want to be locked into another situation like Alexis Sanchez, where we take a player for little to no money, but
Yeah.
the rest of his contract is such a nightmare that it becomes embroiled in this contract disputes for other players.
Can't
where
see
other
Rabiot.
players are suddenly going, I want more money because he's earning this.
Can't see Rabiot, you know, making any films in Chile during the season, so
I mean, no.
probably all right on that front.
But equally, his off-the-field antics do worry me to some extent.
Yeah, especially when you consider the departures at Manchester United in midfield this summer. So Ander Herrera, of course, moving on to Pashi's new at PSG, always contributed massively on the defensive end. Juan Mata all but confirmed the little Spaniard is going, and he regularly contributed on the key passes front, they need at least 1.5 per 90. So bringing in someone like Adrien Rabiot, who's multifaceted, would tick multiple boxes. And you've freed up £215,000 a week in wages with those two departing. So that pays for Rabiot straight away, doesn't it? Let's have a look at some of the Frenchman's stats, because in the first 6 months of 18-19, he was looking like an absolute world beater, wasn't he?
Yeah.
In that kind of hybrid 6-8 position. So 4 tackles and interceptions per 90, 1.8 dribbles, and 10.7 deep progressions.
Outrageous.
Which was what Jorginho was putting up in the first 10-12 games at Chelsea. For some context, when he looked like an absolute world beater before that kind of system was sussed out. I think that probably still would put him in the top 3-5 ball progressors in Europe this season. Of course, not put at the same sort of minutes as the rest of those guys, owing to his exodus from the squad. But yeah, up there with Cruz, Messi and Thiago, at least for the first half of the season. Before Frenkie de Jong was brought in as what you'd imagine as the long-term solution to Sergi Busquets, Adrien Rabiot was considered as a candidate, wasn't he? Showing how highly regarded he is by the elite clubs in world football. And will he find it easy to fit in at United, Joe, having already played with Pogba and Martial? How good was their relationship at youth level? I think they featured around 14 times together already. And Pogba definitely needs midfield reinforcements, doesn't he? I think if you're going to convince him to stay, then you need someone of that calibre to come in and really alleviate some of Manchester United's midfield problems from him. Guys, do you think this would be a good move? Like Joe said, is it worth the risk given his attitude off the pitch? Let us know in the poll just above. Our final transfer winner is Inter Milan, and that is of course because Antonio Conte is stepping into the fray, and when that happens, tends to get shaken up, and my oh my did the Nerazzurri need it. So let's just recap their season under Luciano Spalletti and touch upon a few top line points as to why he got the chop. So they finished 4th behind Atalanta. Gasparini's men, of course, relying heavily on homegrown talent and his sort of ageing stars in the form of Ilicic and Papu Gomez, unlike Inter Milan, who spent 90 million euros in the summer acquiring new talent. The Nainggolan move didn't work out. He was a little bit past it, a little bit injury prone, didn't clock up that many minutes. Lautaro Martinez had to kind of play multiple positions in the absence of Mauro Icardi, which is a situation that we've addressed many times. We won't go into it, but of course that didn't help Spalletti with a player, who's contributing to 40% of the team's goals regularly, dropping out of the side. And the whole Keita Balde loan move didn't really work out. I like that more so than the Nainggolan move, but didn't really come good, did it? And I don't think they've taken up the option, to sign him on a permanent basis. They only won back-to-back matches, the Nerazzurri, on 4 occasions last season, so really struggled for consistency. The captain going on a self-imposed exile, like I've already touched upon, being stripped of the captaincy, being forced to train with the reserves definitely doesn't help. I'm not going to go back into that. I'm boring myself talking about it. But Conte comes in, Joseph, on an absolute wedge of cash, and they'll be hoping that he can challenge Juventus at a time when Napoli aren't as strong. The AC Milan still haven't got their shit together, and Simeone Inzaghi appears to have taken Lazio as far as he can, with of course Roma slipping by the wayside as well.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting time for Antonio Conte to come into the club, certainly. Obviously, Inter Milan getting set early doors. The other Milan clubs still don't have a boss. Roma don't have a boss. Juventus still hunting for a boss and struggling by all accounts. Obviously, seem to have approached Maurizio Sarri, but we are going to come on to that in just a little bit. So Antonio Conte comes in early doors. We'll be able to get his transfer and season preparation started in June, which I think is a big, big positive for the Nerazzurri. And if we look at some of the targets he's already been linked to, they're pretty solid. You look at Romelu Lukaku. Apparently Conte's #1 target, obviously wanted to sign him at Chelsea, missed out on him, he joined Manchester United instead, and now he wants to take him from Manchester United to Milan. Now, there are a few problems with this move. I don't think that Inter Milan can afford him. Right now, they're £40 million in the hole with FFP, and of course he is on serious wages at Manchester United. So if they do indeed sign him, they're probably going to take a huge hit out of their transfer budget, because Man United are looking for in the region of £70 million and all of his wages. So he won't be easy to get out of Manchester. Mauro Icardi, though, does look like he's coming back into the fold. Obviously, kind of flew by the wayside. You touched upon it there under Spalletti, but we all know what a talent he is if you can get him training and with the right attitude and on your side.
Yeah.
The back line as well. Obviously, Diego Godin looking like he's going to come in through the door. Be interesting to see whether Conte operates with a 3 at the back system. Skriniar there, Godin coming in, and De Vrij. That could be pretty solid. If I was an Inter Milan fan, I'd be thinking, let's get the back 3 played. They've also been heavily linked with Mateo Kovacic. Obviously, once an Inter Milan boy before he moved to Real Madrid, so would be returning back home. I don't think that one's going to happen. If anybody's going to sign Mateo Kovacic, I think it'll probably be Chelsea. Even though they have the transfer ban, they do still have the option to sign him.
That's
on
only
a
if
permanent.
they can retain, Maurizio Sarri as well, I guess. Like, does he want to...
I think even if Maurizio Sarri moves on, because of the transfer ban, Chelsea will have no other option but to take Mateo Kovacic on a permanent.
And he might get a little bump in his wages as a result. I suppose, yeah, he holds a kind of stronger bargaining chip at Chelsea, doesn't he?
Yeah.
But yeah, Chelsea, a puzzling situation there as well. Like you said, if Antonio Conte comes in and that does help facilitate a move for Lukaku, that is a hell of a way to kick off a transfer window.
Yeah.
But the reason they've sort of made all winners is because Antonio Conte tends to get the best out of the current playing personnel at his disposal, doesn't he? Hugely pragmatic manager. I think he'll play up to some of the strengths, the obvious strengths in that squad, and he'll be getting a lot more out of them. So plenty of reasons to be positive.
Yeah, 100%. I think if ever there was a time to challenge Juventus as well, it might well be now. Obviously, scrambling around for a manager. Nobody really knows who's going to come in there. If it is Maurizio Sarri, although he has won Europa League this year, still unproven with that level of player, of a Cristiano Ronaldo type figure. Be really interesting to see how he was trying to manage Cristiano Ronaldo, because I don't think he'll probably be able to demand some of the defensive work that he gets out of other forwards, especially his strikers from a Cristiano Ronaldo. But nevertheless, Conte to Inter Milan, we think this is a pretty solid move. We may as well go straight into our final loser. It's Chelsea, because the man we were just briefly discussing there, Maurizio Sarri, looks like he could well be heading for the exit door despite picking up that Europa League trophy against Arsenal with a 4-1 battering. That's because, according to Sky Sports, he has told the club he wants to leave for Juventus, which would be an incredibly interesting move. Obviously, a bit of debate amongst the Chelsea fan base as to whether it's been a successful season. I think it's been pretty successful. I don't massively rate Maurizio Sarri, but even I think that he's done a good job with this Chelsea squad.
I like this last-minute spanner in the works. He was saying prior to the final, I deserve to stay at Chelsea. I should be the boss next year. Intimated he was planning for another 12 months. Wins the Europa League. Thinks, actually, I've been disrespected, probably disproportionately throughout the course of the season. I might fuck off now. And Chelsea fans are like, whoa.
I know.
Well, I mean, we didn't rate you, but where are you going?
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden it's like, please don't go, Maurizio. So
a few panic stations. If he does indeed leave, apparently the Chelsea board won't be that bothered, but do want a compensation package if he is to exit of around £5 million. Now, if they can get that over the line, then Sarri is very likely at this stage to become the next boss of Juventus, which would, in my opinion, really hurt Chelsea. Don't really know where they can turn. Don't know how many managers will be that interested, if you're not called Frank Lampard, in taking over a side with a transfer ban that's also losing Eden Hazard to Real Madrid this summer.
yeah, with sort of uninterested owners, let's say.
Yeah.
And that might be underselling it somewhat.
Multiple sources are also reporting that Maurizio Sarri has already met with the Juventus sporting director Fabio Paratici as well in Milan. That apparently happened before the Europa League final, which would be pretty cheeky. However, what I will say is let's take these reports with a bit of a pinch of salt. A lot of them are coming out of Italy. We've also obviously heard loads of reports over the last kind of 2 weeks about Juve being very close to agreeing a deal with Pep Guardiola, which is just utter nonsense. But the Italian press is still spouting that rubbish. So I'm just a bit concerned that the Italian press are also now spouting similar rubbish about Maurizio Sarri. But if this move does happen, Hamel, What are your thoughts? Is it a big blow to Chelsea?
Yeah, I think it's a massive risk, if I'm honest. I think Chelsea should be doing their utmost to convince Maurizio Sarri to stay, to see out the project. Apparently, part of the rationale for bringing him in was that Abramovich aspired to play a better brand of football. Chelsea have always been quite pragmatic with who they employ as manager. The fans have never really demanded a certain style or philosophy, have they? So I suppose on that front, they could go after an Allegri. But if you're Allegri, do you come into Chelsea given this current set of circumstances? Probably not. Impending transfer ban, uninterested owner. Does he get the backing to bring in the playing personnel that help usher in his sort of tactical philosophy, his way of playing? Probably not. So that does leave you, alarmingly for Chelsea fans, I think, and he is a club legend, and no doubt he would answer their call in their time of need, much to his credit, and I do think he's a very smart guy. It does sort of leave you just with Frank Lampard, who has had a solid first season at Derby, let's say, but it's not been awe-inspiring. It wouldn't necessarily tee him up to take the job at Chelsea. I think he definitely needs another 2-3 seasons under his belt before he makes that step. I mean, he's only won 42% of his games, championship games with Derby. They finished in exactly the same position as the season prior, which was 6th, scored the same amount of goals, 69, and actually tallied up one less point on 74 compared to last season. So they've not made a quantum leap forward by any means. He's sort of steadied the ship, much to his credit. He's got the best out of some very promising young players, but this doesn't necessarily qualify him for a team that should be aspiring to finish in the Champions League places in one of the most competitive eras of Premier League football. Laurent Blanc's another candidate according to the papers, but I'm just going to skip over him. I think that's much more of an outside shout. He's probably less likely to be employed than Frank Lampard, I'd say. Of course, not had a top-level job since PSG, where he actually put up, pretty underrated numbers, in my opinion. Let's move on to sort of key transfers that they could possibly bring in and people that they've been linked with in the last sort of week, because DiMarzio is reporting that Philippe Coutinho is now top of Chelsea's transfer list to replace the outgoing Eden Hazard, who of course contributed to most of their goals. Barcelona would apparently be demanding 150 million euros, although I think they'd probably settle for around the 100 million mark if someone came in for the Brazilian, who's actually contributed to a goal every 289 minutes this campaign. Just to give you a point of comparison, Hazard was involved in a goal every 94 this term, although Coutinho was putting up very similar numbers in his last sort of final 18 months at Liverpool, when he was one of the best players in the Premier League. So they'll be hoping he can replicate those sort of numbers if they double down on him with that sort of cash. Yeah, it's really confusing, this one. I feel like we're in danger of talking it to death. Let's just wait, and watch and observe what Chelsea do over the next coming week, because their season, I think, could be over before it started if you employ someone like Frank Lampard. He's just not qualified to compete with that level of management in the Premier League, in my opinion. And he's going to get more bandwidth, isn't he? Fans will probably allow him to finish 6th or 5th as long as they see some sort of progression, maybe some integration of the youth. But that's a backward step from where they are currently under Maurizio Sarri. What do you guys think? Let us know in the comments below. That is the show for this week. Joe, let's wrap it up here, mate, because we've laboured through this. What should the fans do next, I guess?
Yeah, head over to Euro Football Daily. ERU wrapping up the big season review kind of thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where they look at the big season winners and the big season losers. How many big seasons can I fit into one big season ending? Either way,
big, though.
go to ERU because it is a big season, and it has been a big season. Thanks. Bye.